The president is clearly frustrated in this. We got one more clip here, and but what I think was really important about what he said in this speech, this impromptu speech, was this notion of it should be politicized because. Then there is like room and there becomes sort of a narrative of like, it is legitimate to go out and of course it is. And it's something that we've been saying obviously for years, but this is what politics is. You have a problem in society and you say, we want to change the laws so that we don't have this problem anymore. We want to change the laws to address this problem. It's not that this problem is an opportunity to say, to push some other agenda. The agenda here is to deal with this problem. Let's hear the president say this, and hopefully. It was really interesting to me, too, because at one point in this address, he basically challenged the media, put up these facts and figures. I'm not going to announce them. You put them up because if I say it, it's going to be something, Obama says this. You put it up. And I think we're going to see the media do that. I mean, it was an interesting tactic by Obama. But let's hear Obama say, now is exactly the time when we get political about this.
And of course, what's also routine is that somebody somewhere will comment and say, Obama politicized this issue. Well, this is something we should politicize.
1-5.
It is relevant to our common life together, to the body politic. I would ask news organizations, because I won't put these facts forward, have news organizations tally up the number of Americans who've been killed through terrorist attacks over the last decade and the number of Americans who've been killed by gun violence. And post those side by side on your news reports. This won't be information coming from me, it will be coming from you. We spend over $1 trillion and pass countless laws and devote entire agencies to preventing terrorist attacks on our soil, and rightfully so. And yet, we have a Congress that explicitly blocks us from even collecting data on how we could potentially reduce gun deaths. How can that be?
So, there you have the president basically doing, I think what he feels he can do at this point, which is to just try and use his access to the media in some way of like, creating a narrative. What's also really interesting to me is that
say your point, and then I want to say one thing before I forget after that.
That there have been now calls from people like center right people, like this should be an issue in the debate, and it's going to be brought up. There's no doubt in my mind, it's going to be brought up in the Democratic debate, right? Because this is just a low hanging piece of fruit for a journalist to say to Bernie Sanders, who has been very much, in many respects, voted the NRA line, coming from Vermont in many respects. I don't know where he is on specific gun control. You know better than I would. So you're going to see this come up in that debate, and it only makes sense that you would see it in the Republican debate as a way of starting to juxtapose these things. Say what you want, and then I want to transition to sort of that dynamic, actually.
Yep. Well, I'll say quickly, when it comes to Bernie, the biggest problem right now with Bernie, more recently, he was against the Brady bill in the past. I mean, he was bad. I mean, there's no way to defend his record in the past. It was very bad. More recently, he supported the bill that got a majority of the Senate after Newtown, and he's been good. But the biggest problem, I will honestly say, with him is that is really in the rhetoric. is, sometimes he still responds, and you and I talked about this on the show before, and really, if he knew how disturbing that was and how much it upset people who are in this community who are victims and survivors and who've lost family members, when he says, somebody could have used a hammer instead of a gun, which, again, is just, for somebody as smart as somebody as smart as Bernie, that's a really dumb thing to say.
Right.
I mean, if you can find a way to kill a classroom full of kids with a hammer in a minute, I don't want to say I'd be impressed with you because that's terrible, but you know what I mean.
Right.
It's not possible. And some things like that. He's sort of parroted some of the right-wing rhetoric, and that's what's really upset some of us. And I wish somebody close to him would tell him that and get him to stop doing that, because his votes were correct more recently. But what I wanted to say is the difference here, the disparity that President Obama refers to, and what you've been talking about, Sam, sadly, is again, another reminder. I'm just not going to be politically correct about it, because if I am, then I can't tell the truth. And the truth is that it's the priorities of white rural males. That is what's happening here, because the civil liberties they're more than willing to give up are getting on an airplane. First of all, a lot of the types of people we're talking about don't get on airplanes. That's not they're not experiencing that regularly like many other people are, so it's not as big of a problem. But in addition to that, if they are, they know that they're doing it to go after the Muslim guy, so it's okay, right? I mean, that's the way they see it. Whereas, so you can take away any civil liberty you want as long as they assume the people that really are going to suffer are people that don't look like them. And that's what we're talking about here. But with guns, you're actually coming to you're saying to them, you can't have an assault weapon. And they have the same selfish attitude as they have on so many other things. I don't want to say this is all white rural males, but it certainly is a majority who just don't care. It's not happening in their community because nobody, there's more deer living there than people. And in essence, they don't care, and they care that they get to have their toy. So it'd be the same as if essentially we were being ruled by the 10% or whatever percent of people it is, whatever small percent think we should have absolutely no laws about driving. I mean, that's what we have. That's really in many states what you've got. Not nationally and not in a lot of states, but in at least 15, 20 states, it'd be like if the people who want to be able to drive at any at any speed at any time while drinking and whatever, they're the ones who are determining the gun laws. The equivalent of those guys are determining the gun laws in those states. And I'm sorry for just calling it out like it is, but it's mostly white, rural, and exurban guys. That's who we're talking about.
And the power, for whatever reason, that sort of
well, in Republican primaries, because of gerrymandering and because of states like South Dakota that get as many senators as California, they play a disproportionate role in our politics. They shouldn't have that much power. They are a dwindling majority, or white people in general are. White male rural types aren't a majority, but they're who shows up. They're the ones who show up in a lot of Republican primaries and gerrymandered districts. They're the ones who show up in places like Utah and South Dakota and Alabama and states that are very rural and don't have near the population of New York or of Illinois or California, but get the same representation. And that's why we are all living with their thinking on these issues or lack thereof. That's what it is.